The days of police officers searching vehicles without a warrant are a thing of the past. I'll explain to you where we came from, how we got here, and my top 3 reasons why those days are over with. In order to understand why warrantless searches of vehicles has gone away, you really have to go back to the Constitutional Convention. That was where the men who created the Constitution decided that we need a Fourth Amendment. And they decided that because they had, number one, just broken free from the rule of a monarchy where the king could direct his men to infringe upon the liberties of the citizens of that monarchy, come into their homes whenever they felt like it, and really just make life tough. So, as it related to property and vehicles, which were just horse-drawn carriages at that time, they set it up 3 different ways. Number one, you got to have probable cause. Okay. Number two, there has to be exigent circumstances, and number three, you need the approval from a neutral third party, a magistrate or a judge, someone with an unbiased opinion that has an unbiased look at what you've written to say yes or no. That was the way it was until 1925, the United States versus Carroll. And I'll just give you the cliff notes of the case. This is during the era of Prohibition, where alcohol is illegal. Mr. Carroll is set up in a sense to where he's supposed to sell some alcohol. It doesn't happen. He gets on the road and the police stop him and they search his vehicle. He's arrested, he's tried, he's convicted. He takes it all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And kudos to the police officer for his testimony and the police officer's lawyers for their opinion in that, hey, look, the police officer searched his vehicle because there would have been too long of a time to get a warrant. And right during this time, like that kind of makes sense, especially when you think about the era and the time where vehicles are. The Model T had just come out. There weren't a ton of vehicles on the road. It would have been easy for Mr. Carroll to push, punch, shoot that police officer, take off down the road, and be free from justice. There's no radios. There's no cameras. There's no telephones. There's none of those things that would have helped the police officer if Mr. Carroll had taken flight. So I get it on that end, right? I also understand after studying the Constitution, and I just gave you the framework of the men who wrote it, why that was a problem. And even though the majority said, yes, okay, we can conduct these warrantless searches of vehicles now because it would take a long time to get a warrant. Vehicles are mobile and, it was something new for them. There were 2 justices, Sutherland and McReynolds, and they kind of set it up for what it is today. In their opinion, they said, if an officer upon mere suspicion of a misdemeanor may stop a person on a public highway, take articles away from them, and use them as evidence of a crime and convict them, what happens to the Fourth Amendment? Right? If we're not utilizing that neutral third party, if we're not giving people their, due diligence and doing it the right way, what's going to come of this? Hey, I agree there as well. So, United States versus Carroll created the federal motor vehicle exception in that based upon probable cause alone, and nothing else, you can search a vehicle without a warrant. And that's the way it was. Now, in a case, Arkansas versus Sanders, Mr. Sanders is on a plane. Police officers have information that Mr. Sanders is carrying drugs in a suitcase. So the police see him get off the plane. He gets into a taxi. They stop the taxi. They search the vehicle. They search the locked suitcase. Note the locked suitcase. Okay. He's tried, convicted. He appeals to the Arkansas Supreme Court, and they say that the search was illegal because the suitcase was locked. There's a higher expectation of privacy for something that is locked. You need to get a warrant for it. Okay. So law enforcement gets their hands slapped that time. Another case, the United States versus Ross back in 1982, Mr. Ross is accused of selling drugs out of the trunk of his vehicle. And so the police observe him doing this. They ultimately stop him. They search the car, and inside of a brown paper bag, they find drugs. He's tried and convicted. He takes it to the United States Supreme Court, and the court says the search was legal because that brown bag in the back of a car, there's no real expectation of privacy when it comes to something that's not basically not locked. And so we have the federal motor vehicle exception establishes the warrantless search of cars, but we know that you may search a car, but if something is locked in the car, you need to get a warrant for it, suitcase, whatever it may be. If something is unlocked, for say, like we found out in Ross, then it's fair game. Then comes in 2014, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania versus Cheyenne Gary. In this case, Mr. Gary is stopped. The officers find probable cause to search the vehicle, and they find drugs. This case establishes the odor of marijuana as probable cause to search a vehicle. Now, we have taken, the warrantless search based off probable cause, and we really have reduced it down to the odor of marijuana. But even though the court said, yes, the search was legal, these things are cyclical. So you hear from the dissenting justices that say, we're doing a disservice to the process by not using a neutral third party. Technology has advanced to the point where warrantless searches of vehicles should not be a thing. Now, Commonwealth versus Alexander, decided in 2020. Mr. Alexander is stopped by police. He tells them, I just smoked a blunt, me and my passenger, and based on the odor of burnt marijuana, they search the vehicle. Inside of the vehicle, they find a locked box, and Mr. Alexander is wearing the key to the box around his neck. You can already see where this is going. They take the key, unlock the box, and inside they find drugs. The case goes to the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, and here is where things are made right. The Supreme Court says the search was illegal. Not only was the search illegal because the box was locked and needed a warrant for it, but no longer are we going to allow the odor of marijuana to simply be a probable cause for searching a vehicle. These things, like I said before, they come in cycles. I, as a police officer, am not upset by the decision that was made by the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, because again, I've studied and I understand the way that it was intended to be used, or the way that searches of vehicles was intended, is not being done. And kudos to these justices for righting that wrong in a sense. Stick around and I'll give you my top 3 reasons why the Commonwealth versus Alexander decision was made. My top 3 reasons for why this decision, Commonwealth versus Alexander, was made. Number 3 is because police officers are articulating well enough. They aren't explaining their thoughts and their ideas well enough in court. I've been in court. That's a place you should be confident in speaking about your actions and your thoughts and what led you ultimately to do what you did. Okay? You have to really be up on case law, and you have to be comfortable with it. And we see it all the time on the internet where police officers get stumped by everyday citizens who know maybe 1 or 2 things more. That's one of the reasons why I created the Hughes Initiative, was to educate new police officers and police officers that are currently on the job, along with the general public. Right, the goal is to bridge the gap in information, meaning that what we know as police officers, you know as citizens. And so not being able to articulate what it is that led you to do what you did has been damaging us for years. In Commonwealth versus Alexander, the justices said the police officers did not articulate a need to search that vehicle right then and there. That speaks volumes for what has been happening in court over the last couple of decades. The number two reason is this. A big city newspaper gathered the statistics from a big city police department. The city and the police department will remain nameless. And what they found was that the city had conducted 2,000 warrantless searches of vehicles. Of those 2,000, 80% were conducted against Black drivers. Listen, this speaks right to the bias inside of law enforcement that minorities are screaming about. Because not only were 80% of the warrantless searches conducted on Black drivers, but only 12% of those searches yielded any type of illegal narcotics or weapons. 12%, what that looks like to me is that you're just stopping Black people just to search their cars. And what it says is what Black people have been saying for a long time is that, listen, all of us are not criminals. All of us do not carry weapons or sell drugs. Right? 12% out of 2,000% or out of 2,000 people are the ones that had illegal drugs and narcotics. That means that, 88% of the other people were just stopped and just had their Fourth Amendment right, infringed upon. That's not going to cut it. 12% is just not going to cut it. Like, let's just be honest. That's not a number that's anywhere close to justifying, like the results are not justified by the means, in that it would be different if 80% of those drivers were Black and, 73% of those traffic stops or those warrantless searches yielded some type of illegal narcotics or weapons. But that's not the case. And I'm sure these numbers are similar across the country amongst the police departments and who they are searching. Black people are not all criminals. All minorities are not all engaged in illegal activity. The vast majority of us are everyday people who go to work and come home and try to take care of our families. Are there people that smoke weed? Yes, there are. But that doesn't mean that they are criminals in the sense that they sell drugs just because they smoke weed. Some drug dealers do. And that's another video for another time. But right here, everyday Americans, they smoke weed. Right? And with weed becoming legal in other places, the odor of burnt marijuana or marijuana in general is just not enough to search a vehicle. You need more. Right? And my number one reason why warrantless searches of vehicle has gone away is because they were supposed to. You heard it back in 1925 from Sutherland and McReynolds. Stopping a person, taken from them, and using it as evidence of a crime is ultimately not the right way to go about it. And then you heard it in Arkansas versus, you heard it in Commonwealth versus Gary, in that we're doing the process a disservice by not using that neutral third party. If you are confident in what you're doing as a police officer, let a judge say, oh yes, I agree with you. Here's your warrant. I mean, sometimes we have to do it for blood. We can do it for vehicles. Other areas of law enforcement, whether it be high-level drug investigations, search warrants for houses and things of that nature, they have to go through the same process, right? If you want to get information off someone's laptop, you're not just taking that laptop. You're getting you a warrant to take that laptop, and then inside the warrant, you include everything that you want to search for. And the judge reads it, looks at it, says, yep, here you are. And then when you go to court, there's no questions because someone else agreed with you. We are where we are, ultimately, my final opinion, because law enforcement is really failing to evolve with society. Instead of being ahead of the curve, we always seem to be behind. And I believe it's because the idea that this is the way things have always been done is so prevalent, that's not helping us. That really is not helping us. And it's not helping our image. It's not helping our interactions with the general public either. If you like the video, hit the subscribe button and follow me for more.